This is a review of some of the major parts of the brain. We have the right and left cerebral hemispheres. Separating the hemispheres down the midline is the longitudinal fissure. The major lobes of the brain are the frontal lobes, the parietal lobes, the occipital lobes, and laterally we have the temporal lobes. On the surface of the brain, we could see these ridges. They represent the gyri, and these folds represent the sulci. One of the major sulcuses is the central sulcus. Goes all the way across, and the gyrus just anterior to the central sulcus is the precentral gyrus, and there's one posterior to the central sulcus, and that's the postcentral gyrus. Laterally, we have a sulcus. It's called a lateral sulcus. If we open that up, we can see inside, and that is another lobe of the brain, the insula. Posteriorly, we could see the cerebellum. This is the right and left cerebellar hemispheres. Down the midline is the vermis. The cerebellum is separated from the occipital lobe of the cerebrum by the transverse fissure. From this inferior view, we can see part of the brainstem. Up in here would be the midbrain. We have the pons, and then the medulla oblongata, and then we go into the spinal cord. All right, we're looking at a medial to lateral view. Some of the structures we have is the corpus callosum. Here is the lateral ventricle. The tissue that covers that ventricle is the septum pellucidum. We have the fornix. Over here is the third ventricle. This red structure here represents the choroid plexus, which would be found in each of the ventricles. Here is the thalamus, and this structure here is the interthalamic adhesion that connects the right and left thalamic bodies. We have the hypothalamus, and then posteriorly we have the epithalamus. We have the optic chiasm. That's where the optic tracts cross. Right here, extending from the hypothalamus, it's not shown on this side of the model, but I'll show you in a second on the other side, is the infundibulum that connects the hypothalamus to the pituitary gland, and then we have the mammillary body. So if we look at this view, we could see right here, there's the infundibulum and the pituitary gland. All right, so this area here represents the midbrain, the pons, the medulla oblongata, the spinal cord. When we leave the third ventricle, you're going to enter the cerebral aqueduct, which travels to the fourth ventricle. And then the fourth ventricle can continue down as the central canal of the spinal cord. On the posterior portion of the midbrain, we have this whole structure, the corpora quadrigemina. This portion of it is the superior colliculus, and this portion is the inferior colliculus. This is a medial lateral view of the cerebellum. We can see all this white matter. This represents the arbor vitae of the cerebellum. Okay, now we can look at some of the cranial nerves. These structures here represent the olfactory bulbs. This is where the olfactory nerves that enter the skull from the nasal mucosa come to the brain and join up to form these bulbs. They then continue back as the olfactory tracts. Right here is just a portion of the optic nerves. They continue posteriorly, and the optic nerves cross at the optic chiasm, and then continue back posteriorly as the optic tracts. If we look right here, we could see cranial nerve 3. Then we have cranial nerve 4, 5, which is trigeminal. Move medially, it's cranial nerve 6, 7, facial, 8, glossopharyngeal. 8 is vestibular cochlea. 9 is glossopharyngeal. 10, vagus. 11, accessory. And then 12, hypoglossal. All right, once again, we could see the pons and the medulla oblongata. So just in summary, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. If I open them up just to show you from a different view, because you can see 3 a little bit better this way. So there's cranial nerve 3, and then deep in there is cranial nerve 4. So that represents some of the major parts of the brain.